Welcome to the Voices of the Learning Network podcast. Today we're discussing the importance of adopting future skills in the age of AI. My name's Kim Ellis and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by Erica Farmer from Quantum Rise. Welcome, Erica. Please can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invite, for being here. It's great to be doing more with the Learning Network. So I'm the co-founder and business director of Quantum Rise Talent Group. I'm also a professional speaker. So I spend my time at events and with clients speaking predominantly around things like future skills and artificial intelligence in the learning and development and HR sector. My background's 25 years with some of the UK's well-known corporates, such as British Gas, LV and Specsavers. And I set up Quantum Rise about 4 years ago now with my business partner, Hayley Bird, in response to a real need for high quality, high impact virtual and online learning. So yeah, I've been in L&D and education most of my life. I live in the West Country and just kind of love what I do, really. And it's great. Like I said, it's great to be here on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Erica. Right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. AI is such a buzzword these days, but it's not all just about the tech. How can we make sure that people in our organizations actually embrace AI and not just learn about the tech stuff? How can we win their hearts and minds?
That's the crux of it for a lot of people, isn't it? This isn't just another new system that organizations are implementing. It's not another business transformation. This is something that's going to change both our professional working lives and our personal lives as well. So when we think about, humans and who we are, we've got to think about our emotional side first and then onto our kind of logical work side. So just by kind of training people on ChatGPT or co-pilots and not addressing the emotional need when it comes to either things like change, trust, or fear is where organizations potentially are going to go wrong here. So things like understanding that actually, is AI going to take your job? Maybe in some circumstances, but the great thing about that is it gives you the opportunity to level up and upskill in other ways to do more of what you love in your job and automate the stuff that you don't love in your job. So this is why organizations need to invest in the big picture so people really understand what we mean when we say things like artificial intelligence or machine learning, a lot of this new kind of relatively recent jargon that we're starting to hear. And actually, we've got to give people the time and space to think about those human distinctive skills, but also how they feel about artificial intelligence as a kind of relatively new concept. Because if people are just in fight or flight about it, if they're just worried about things, you're not going to get people engaged and you're not going to get the best out of people from that perspective.
Amazing, thank you. So in other words, people have got to future up, which is the title of this podcast. Traditional leadership training often means long classroom sessions, but we all know that's not always effective. So how can we shift to more real-time, on-the-job learning, especially with the pace of change that AI brings?
Yeah, this is a great one, because if we think about where we could really maximize the use of large language models like ChatGPT and Copilot, Google Gemini, for example, some of the real interventions that I'm seeing is by using these kind of things as in the moment tutors and teachers and coaches, not just something that can be a productivity tool to create your next report or your PowerPoint. I'm not kind of dissing that, because there's value in that as well as a content creation support partner, but almost thinking about it as a thought partner, something where you can practice a skill through role play or bounce an idea or get the term devil's advocate when you want a different view on your own opinion. That, for me, doing that in the flow of work can be fantastic for leaders and for managers, and actually for anybody in an organization who wants to learn as they go, as they're doing the job, not fill their heads up with a bunch of stuff that they don't need in the moment to be the best at their job, and not take 12 weeks out for an induction or a leadership or a management program, which traditionally we've seen. So if we can get people in that kind of learning agility frame of mind, that I'm going to pick up and put down skills and knowledge in the moment when I need it, and that in itself is probably a podcast on its own, because we're talking about parking resource and power and ego and knowledge and all that stuff. If we can get into that space of I'm going to collaborate with ChatGPT in the moment when I need it. That really is learning in the flow of work, rather than I'm just going to fill my head with loads of stuff in a workbook and hopefully I might apply 10 to 15% of it if we're lucky. That's quite a big mindset shift, particularly in the L&D and HR sector, where we've built this whole industry on deploying and facilitating knowledge and skill. So, we've got to understand how we feel about that in our sector, and we become facilitators of collaboration as opposed to deployers of knowledge, I guess, in that space. So I say with this stuff, your only limitation is your own creativity in how to use AI, but it's a mindset thing, probably more than a skill set thing.
Love that. Only limitation is your creativity. And as you were talking there, I was thinking it'd be great if, let's say, we were building a leadership course and then we created a custom GPT and trained it in the specifics about the leadership styles, preferences, resources, all of that, and the business needs, business values, so that they could use it during the training session and during the, what comes next, all of the embedding phase. That would be amazing to have it really integrated into the leadership courses.
Yeah. And if you think about other benefits there, we talk a lot about personalization of learning. If learners could use a large language model as their own personal coach or tutor, and you're right, either an internal GPT, so they don't need to worry about data protection and information, that kind of stuff, or even something like Copilot, where they might actually get a wider view how other organizations do stuff, because we know there's value in that as well. It's all about connecting people and using the large language model in a way that they understand is going to benefit them. And in fact, it doesn't have to be a presenter or a trainer or a facilitator who is a human, but actually more of a digital colleague in that space. And the human elevates to become the guardian of quality, for example, when it comes to the leadership program or whatever it is that we're using. So again, it's kind of us as L&D and HR people understanding what the art of the possible is for our roles and tasks, and not feeling threatened that, if I'm not delivering training anymore, what does that mean for my job? Because the AI's got all the knowledge that it needs anyway. So it's more about supporting and coaching that leader to integrate and collaborate with the machine as a colleague, rather than looking to the L&D function or looking to the L&D budget or whatever it might be, which is what we've traditionally done.
Something you said there about being the guardians of quality just sparked in my mind that we're already doing this when we're doing the user-generated content.
Absolutely.
And a lot of companies are adopting that, and they're asking their colleagues and their staff, create these videos, do this micro-learning, create these resources for us to share with other colleagues. So it's just really the AI version is an extension of that. It's not a replacement, it's an extension.
Yeah. And when user generated content was kind of started talking about, we started talking about it when I was heading up our operation training in LV, which was 2014. There was always the pushback, or at least the concern that of the quality, right? So it should be the training team that are doing it. It should be taking agents off the front line doing it because they don't have the skills or they don't have the time or the inclination or whatever it might be. But then you always had that rub is, well, how does training stay up to date with the processes that actually the frontline users have? So by using that kind of quality guardian type framework, but multiply that by God knows how much when it comes to the opportunity with our AI, I think your example is really relevant there. But this will, we still see people push back against user-generated content because it strikes fear into our own confidence and our own heart and our own way that we see ourselves doing that job. And this is where I can't stress enough with the hearts and minds piece, but also the bigger picture piece. Us as L&D and HR really need to introspectively kind of understand, how do I feel about AI, and have I thought about the opportunities it could present me, both personally and professionally, to be able to lift up and do more of what I love or rather than driving around the country or sitting in front of a PowerPoint or whatever it might be. And some people might love that, don't get me wrong, horses for courses and everything. But I think we have to challenge ourselves first. And going back to your kind of initial question around, it's not just the technology. We're very good at kind of in L&D saying, right, this is the skill, this is the framework, the competency. You need to get people doing ABC and evidence XYZ. Actually, we need to probably start with ourselves on this one first.
We hear a lot about learning agility and critical thinking being crucial for the future. How can we actually help people develop these skills, and what practical steps can businesses take to make it happen?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And I guess one of the things we need to think about is what's the end in mind. So if we do spend time and effort developing people's critical thinking or learning agility, what does that mean to either our people, our engagement, our organization, or our clients? So what's the end that we're going after? Because these can be quite fashionable terms, quite in the moment jazzy terms, and they could be used to placate people's fear of using artificial intelligence. But actually, from that perspective, we need to think about why we're doing what we're doing. And actually, most of those things are the practical element of having a go and having a great manager or leader coaching, giving feedback around what works, what could be even better next time, that kind of continuous improvement cycle. Just like working with AI, though, certainly learning agility, complex problem solving, critical thinking, those three skills in particular, I would argue, are more traits, because the mindset shift of not holding on to power and feeling comfortable to learn new things and deploy them at record time in the moment is absolutely what's going to give organizations their competitive edge, both now and in the future. But that is, I've got to get over my own mindset to be able to say it's okay to try and forget that stuff that I've always clung on to, because A, that's not going to serve me well anymore. B, that's not what the organization needs. And C, I'm just going to burn out if I'm going to try and hold everything in my head at one time. And a really good example of that is when we see managers still trying to manage in that kind of 80s yuppie type way. We know that telling people what to do and being authoritarian and dictatorial, we know people, certainly newer generations, don't respond to that kind of management style or skill. But we still have managers who feel comfortable in that kind of space, still trying to do that but get a different result. So those managers that still can now pick up a new way of doing things and respond to new generations, and perhaps have a good balance between coach and tell rather than just constantly tell, we know they're the people that are going to get more results. The people that challenge themselves, but challenge themselves in a mindset way and as well as the skill set way. Same with critical thinking, being able to question and continually ask why without getting people's backs up to get to the root of the problem and solve what we think is the real problem rather than the superficial problem, because we're all a bit scared of saying what that is. And having straight talking, clear conversations and expressing yourself, that's where the real mining for gold comes from with this stuff, is giving, and that again is a mindset thing, because we don't want to upset people. We're a bit British with this stuff. We don't want to ask a hard question. We don't want to get somebody in trouble by kind of really raising what the true problem is. But if we don't do that, we're actually kind of having a disservice for everybody.
So we really need to be a little bit disruptive in our adoption. How can having a disruptive mindset be crucial in navigating the AI landscape, especially if you're in L&D or HR?
Yeah, I think disruption, if you're going to put a tag or a word on what needs to happen, I think that's a great one. And it's disruptive, not just doing things differently, but it's disruptive in the way of having the bravery and the courage to call it out when we say we're going to do something and we don't do it, or we say we're going to try something different, but actually that pushes us out of our comfort space a little bit too much, and it's easier just to default to what we've always done, and we've all been guilty of that at one stage or another. And I know a lot of this plays into kind of, there's some more traits that some more personalities tend to have that prefer to play in that kind of high challenge space, but might not be so great in the high support space. And this is where you need both again. To be able to disrupt, people need to feel comfortable and confident enough to be able to do it, but also comfortable and confident enough to step out of that zone, feel like they can try something different without fear of reprimand. And we all know that is psychological safety, right? So all of these good practice things that we talk about in L&D, and by the way, we should be walking the walk now more than ever, are going to serve us well in the future of AI. I think we just need to hold our feet to the fire a little bit more to say, are we truly doing this? Or are we just wagging our finger at the business and telling them that they have to do it instead?
And why is it so important to future up to remain competitive?
Yeah, I love that term future up, because it's all encompassing in everything that we've kind of talked about in this podcast, right? So we all know the age old kind of dinosaur analogy, or organizations like Blockbusters or BlackBerry, who wanted to do the same thing over and over again because there was an arrogance of this works, so why should we change? And we know what happened to Blockbuster. Nobody goes down to the store and goes and rents VHSs anymore. We literally go onto Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever is and stream in the moment. So if you can imagine, the person who has developed the latest version of the streaming service Netflix, if that person hadn't come in, or the team behind that person hadn't come in and said, Netflix isn't going to be a VHS rental service, it's going to be something very different, which you can access in the moment online. When that person said that for the first time, everybody probably went, what the hell are you talking about? We haven't got the technology for that. We haven't got the ability for that. That's never going to take off because people like watching BBC One. What are you talking about? Actually, you need to, going back to your point around disruptors, and this is a space that if we've got the bravery and the courage and the want to do that in L&D, we've got such an opportunity to play in here. We don't want to be a BlackBerry. We don't want to be a Blockbuster, but we also don't want to leapfrog too far ahead and not take everybody else and the organization with us, because that's not going to create an organization that's going to have competitive edge either, because either it will be too far ahead of what its customers and clients needs, it will be too uncomfortable for the workforce to go with it, and it'll have the opposite effect. So it's a real interesting time for us in L&D, just as it was in the pandemic when we all went virtual and started to work from home. But I think we need to keep those learnings of agility and adaptability and mindset and being people first and people focused even more now into the age of AI and future skills, because if we don't do that, we're not going to have any kind of competitive edge at all.
You've got me having some nostalgia for Blockbuster. That used to be the Friday night treat, going and renting a video, but now everything's at the fingertips. And it just shows how one disruptive thought, one disruptive person has changed the entire trajectory for an industry. So thank you so much for your insights today, Erica. As we wrap up, what key takeaway would you like our listeners to remember when it comes to leapfrogging into the future of work with AI?
Yeah, and this might sound a little bit counterintuitive from me based on everything I've just said, everything I write about, everything I vlog and talk about, but don't feel AI shame or AI guilt. Don't kind of have the FOMO that everybody else is doing it and I'm not. And a lot of people are in that space and they're actually a lot further on than what they think. So if you've logged into ChatGPT, if you've downloaded it on your phone, if you've talked to your child about, what they're using ChatGPT for at school, or if you've kind of played with Copilot on your Office 365 environment or Google Gemini, or even just thought about what does this mean to me and how do I feel about it, that is a great first step. You don't have to be kind of a prompt engineer to feel like you're keeping up with AI. It's about mindset. It's about understanding how you feel. It's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I know that's a bit of a cheesy kind of tagline, but I totally subscribe and buy into that because I think that's how you build confidence. Don't just sit there and do nothing, though. That would be my flag, not a red flag. I'm not going to call it a red flag, maybe an amber flag. Don't sit there and deny that it's happening, because what will happen is AI will embrace you, and we've got an opportunity to embrace AI. So don't think about the FOMO and the AI and the guilt, but do get started.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap on this episode. Thank you for listening, everybody.